Hello, good morning, and good evening to friends across the world. Welcome to the 25th Anniversary International Festival of Arts and Ideas virtual stage. We are pleased to collaborate with the Yale China Association to present this presentation featuring the 2020 Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office New York Arts Activator Jeremy Hung. I'm Melissa Huber, also known as Missy, and the festival's producer. And I'll start with recognition that the International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Chattahoochee, Golden Hill, Pagosset, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the Native people whose lands you are on and the history of the place you are in. You can find out more about Native land near you at https nativeland.ca. The International Festival of Arts and Ideas stands with Black Lives Matter and with countless citizens in our own city and across the country who are exercising their right to protest the systemic racism at the root of police violence. The festival stands in solidarity with Black and Brown communities who are targeted and abused by unjust systems of oppression. Since 2015, the festival has partnered with the Yale China Association to create deep cultural exchanges between arts activators and arts fellows and the greater New Haven community. We look forward each year to meeting the new fellows, learning about their work, providing connections to the field and to greater New Haven, and during the festival, presenting this public-facing program to share a snapshot of each fellow's work while they're here in New Haven. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Vice President and Director of Programs at Yale China, Leslie Stone.
Thank you so much, Missy. I am so delighted to represent the Yale China Association in introducing Jeremy Hung and Eunice Yuan. Yale China brings American and Chinese cultures together by creating lasting transformative partnerships in education, health, and the arts. The Yale China Association has been collaborating with the International Festival of Arts and Ideas on the Yale China Arts and Arts Activator Fellowships for 5 years. Yale China is especially grateful to Arts and Ideas staff Missy Huber, Bobby Asher, and Tiffany Hopkins for their partnership, guidance, and support. We are deeply grateful for the sponsorship, partnership, and collaboration of Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office of New York, especially Director Joanne Chu, Melissa Ng, and Heidi Liu. We are also grateful to the Yale School of Drama for its instrumental role. This program brings cutting-edge artists and arts activators from Hong Kong to New York to New Haven for 6 months of exploration and creation at Yale and in New Haven. Jeremy Hung is the founder of Babel Film Workshop, an education company dedicated to promoting empathy through film culture by engaging students of all ages in the film arts. He has worked in the U.S., Germany, and Hong Kong, and is a graduate of the NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. He arrived in New Haven in early January. Moderating the session will be Dr. Eunice Yuan. Dr. Yuan is a child psychiatry fellow at the Yale Child Study Center. Her work in children's mental health spans from genetics to neurobiology to community-based advocacy and education. Her work involves the arts as well. She utilizes theatrical vignettes to strengthen the child-parent relationship. Dr. Yuan provided her clinical expertise to integrate age-specific emotional wellness goals into the film Stylo project. Today, for this session, we are all participating in the worldwide premiere of 6 student films, witnessing the results of a very productive intensive residency by Jeremy, and learning about the film Stylo's goals of intercultural empathy and emotional wellness. As you listen to Jeremy and Eunice speak about this work, and as you view the films, please write in with your comments. We want to be sure to hear from all of you so that we can respond and engage in a full and expansive conversation. Thank you so much. And now to Jeremy.
Thank you so much, Missy and Leslie, for the introduction. And thank you also everyone on the New Haven side for waking up early for this so that we can accommodate our viewers in Hong Kong. I'm very excited today to be sharing 6 student films that came out of this fellowship project. Um, our goal is basically to see how different these films will be. These films are going to be coming from Hong Kong and New Haven. I had this idea about a year ago now of getting students from different parts of the world to simultaneously participate in the same filmmaking project so that we can actually see where the differences may be, but also how similar they can be underneath the surface. And that, I think, taps into one of the key goals of filmmaking, which is empathy. And with the international nature of this kind of project, the specific type of empathy we will be targeting is intercultural empathy, or the empathy that's created between peoples of different cultures. Now, when we think of filmmaking, we don't typically immediately jump to empathy. A lot of times we just think of it as entertainment, but there are actually specific attributes to film that make it the most successful medium at creating empathy in others. Just an example of this is filmmaking is the only time where you can actually show others exactly how you see the world, and vice versa. You can also use filmmaking to see how others see the world. And the challenge for this, though, is that even as filmmaking technology is becoming increasingly accessible for people of all ages, what is still inaccessible for the large part is the film language, or how we can actually use the technology and use the film medium to express ourselves and share our thoughts and feelings with other people. So that's kind of how I see my role in this project. It's in trying to make and break down the film language into a way so that more students, and not just filmmakers, can make use of this powerful communication medium. I also know that the theme for the festival this year is democracy. So I've kind of seen this as also democratizing the film language for more students around the world. Originally, we were setting this project up between 2 classrooms in New Haven and Hong Kong, but unfortunately, we couldn't make that happen. So what we did was we were actually pushed to create this curriculum online, and we made it available for more students around the world beyond just what we would have done with 2 classrooms. And so we have been very fortunate with the response we have gotten. And as of today, we have had 200 students sign up for the project, leading to 70 completed films and more, representing 3 main countries. So Hong Kong, US, and the UK. What we're going to do today in this presentation is we're going to screen 6 of these films that we have selected in pairs. So these films are going to be shown one after the other, one of them from New Haven and one of them from Hong Kong. They're going to be organized based on prompts. These prompts have been modified to react to the current situation. And the prompts include my daily routine, my homeschooling experience, and how I stay active at home. After we watch each of these pairs, the 4 of us presenters, we're going to come back in and share our thoughts and observations on the films. We each bring our own individual expertise and background to it. Some of us have been to Hong Kong, and some of us grew up there. So I'm excited to see what we all have to say. It's also exciting because I actually don't know what they have to say about the films. It's the first time we're actually discussing it. And as Leslie mentioned, we also encourage all the audience members for you to, as you're watching the films, to type in any observations you're making about the films or how they compare to one another. Our tech team backstage, we're going to be looking through the comments and then featuring some of them on the screen for us to respond to. And if you're one of the student filmmakers who made these films, you're definitely welcome to participate as well and share your thoughts and in response to the audience members. Or correct us if we have made some drastic misinterpretation of your film. So before we go into that, I want to pass it on to one of our most crucial collaborators for this project. Her contribution came completely unexpectedly, but which became a fundamental part of why we're doing this program at all. So here's Dr. Eunice Yun.
Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you for the introduction from Leslie earlier on. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Eunice Yun. I have a special tie, just like similar to Jeremy. Jeremy and I are originally from Hong Kong, so like warm hello to everyone in Hong Kong who are in the audience right now, and hello everyone in New Haven, Connecticut right now. So I am a child psychiatry fellow at Yale Child Study Center, as I was introduced, and I'm specialized in Asian American mental health. And my work crosstalk drama vignette to promote mental wellness in Asian family, really addressing the cross-cultural issue in child and parent conflict issues. So I would like to introduce the concept about mentalization. That is one of the key concept that features around this program. And mentalization is really meaning thinking through the lens of others in a really non-judgmental way and curious way. And this is a fundamental concept where many interpersonal relationships found, especially for my clinical experience with children. This is a key concept where child and parents are bond. So can we really imagine as a parents thinking in the shoes of a teenager? What is it like going through in their life during COVID-19? Or on the flip side, what is it like for a teenager to think through in the parents' lens? It is also very difficult to go through COVID-19. And how do we bring the concept of mentalization into more bigger scope of interpersonal concept, such as what Jeremy is talking about, intercultural empathy? At this time, we are in the US right now talking about how do we promote understand about people have different color, different race, and different living style in the world. How do we use mentalization to be curious and non-judgmental to think of another person's shoes? So this is how we are talking about why Jeremy and I coming together. I'm really thankful to have met Jeremy one day in the hospital cafeteria. We brainstormed this idea, working together, and how lucky am I working with him that I serve as a child mental health consultant and helping in designing program, and especially in the part of reflection, helping student one day make this film. How to reflect in the personal level, in the interpersonal level, or even cross-cultural level when we are viewing the video together. Try to introduce the mentalization concept in the daily life through filmmaking. And I can see the potential of this program. It is such a great intervention in the future. In my practice, when I see patient who are like I see patient who are like from age 2 to all the way to young adult and geriatric population. Many of us, when we face stress and negative emotion and things like that, especially what happened around us around the world right now, many of us it's really difficult to find words to express, and we are using interventions such as art, writing, music, and in this case we're using filmmaking as a way to get into the child internal world, and it is such a healthy coping skill for us to express our feelings. So this is what I see how important of this work is, and I welcome everyone to join us. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Eunice. So without further ado, let's move on to the first series of films. These films are going to be based on the prompt My Daily Routine. We've also invited some of the filmmakers to record a little introduction to the films before we actually watch them. So let's go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kachi Welsh and I'm 16 years old. I got the idea for my video from my overall lack of motivation and procrastination during the quarantine while trying to get schoolwork done. The most difficult part of the whole process was probably editing and listening to my voice over and over and over again, while my favorite part was just filming in general and getting all the clips for my video. I hope you enjoy. Thanks! My daily routine while homeschooling usually starts off by waking up at roughly 2 or 3 p.m. I then walk downstairs to have a very, very late breakfast. I almost always follow up with my first cup of coffee for the day and proceed to do any other morning activities. Showering, changing into a new version of pajamas, and doing my face care routine. While I'd like to say that after this, I go and do all of my work for the week, watch the clouds go passing by, and do some meditation, the reality is that I usually procrastinate until I have something better to do. This usually includes watching Netflix, FaceTiming my best friend, playing with my cat, going for walks, and of course, checking for snacks. Speaking of food, by this time I've worked up an appetite from procrastinating so much. So I make myself my lunch/pre-dinner snack. Once I've sufficiently bored myself from doing nothing, I then move on to reading all the emails and Google Classroom assignments that my teachers have left for me. This is usually followed up by more procrastination of some kind. After getting no work done, dinner is usually ready, so I go spend time with my family. Finally, after a day of getting nothing done, I hop into my final change of pajamas. If you thought that this is the part where I go to bed, you'd be sadly mistaken. My friends, this is the moment you've all been waiting for, when I actually get a spurt of energy to do work. After actually once completing some work, usually while in bed, I fall asleep around 3 a.m.
Hello everybody, my name is Harini. I'm a student at KGB and I'm currently studying in year 10. During our quarantine, we were asked to make a video at home about how we spent our lifestyles, and I decided to make a video about how I spent my day during quarantine. My inspiration for my film came from a movie I watched a couple of years ago called Groundhog Day. I liked the concept of how the actor repeated his main day over and over again, and I felt like that was something we were all going through at that time. Some of the difficulties I faced while making my film were the lack of opportunities and equipment given to me. I noticed that I wasn't able to do as much as I normally would when I'm making a film, and this really lowered my expectations. My favorite part of my film is how I perceived the idea of being stuck at one place. I liked the way that the beginning of the film starts with a static shot of one person in one location. I think that this helps convey the message of being locked inside a cage and unable to go out. Finally, I hope you enjoy my film.
Hello, my name is Harini. I'm a 14-year-old girl and I live in a mediocre-sized apartment in Hong Kong. So far, quarantine has brought a large number of people's daily lives to a halt, and as a side effect, caused extensive frustration and stigma. Many people find the lockdown torturous, as if it's some sort of cruel punishment caused by the coronavirus. But unlike many people, I don't think the same way. Although repeating the same indifferent routine every day is a bit tiring, it feels nice to take some time off my usual jam-packed schedule. I start my day with the vexing sound of my alarm clock, which for some reason always seems to purposely ring when I'm in the middle of a good dream. My alarm is typically set to 8 o'clock in the morning, since online school starts at around 8:15. Considering the short amount of time I have to get ready, my morning routine is usually brisk, and I barely get to eat breakfast. Schooling takes up most of my morning and afternoon, and since nearly all my classes are sluggish and boring, most of my school time is spent cowering over the computer screen lethargically doing my work. After what feels like eternity, school finally ends at around 3:30, and I'm left with the rest of the afternoon to do anything I want. Most of my quarantine afternoons are spent in front of my TV binge-watching Netflix while eating ice cream, which, in my perspective, is absolute heaven. Although sometimes I do try to revise for subjects I'm falling behind in. To be honest, the majority of my evenings are usually unplanned, so I use them to do anything I feel like doing. This commonly means just irritating my friends, or, on very rare occasions, attempting to study. During my stay-at-home period, I usually spend most of my time in my room. Before quarantine, my room was already chaotic as it was, with random misplaced objects and an overflowing bed of stuffed animals. But somehow, quarantine managed to turn it into a pig's farm. Now there are clothes strewn all over the floor, snack papers littered all over the place, and paper scattered on the floor. Although my room looks very similar to a crow's nest, it does come along with some advantages. One thing is that none of my family members ever come into my room, leaving me with all the freedom I want. By this time, it's already time for dinner. In spite of the fact that during quarantine, food is supposed to be an issue, dinner at my house is really delectable, although this might be because my mother spends more time on her cooking nowadays. After filling my stomach with delicious food,
I ruined myself with some more time engulfed in my phone, mostly just going through Instagram, before finally going to bed. After that, I just repeat my day all over again.
So thank you, Katya and Harini, for those films. Before I jump in, I actually want to hear what Missy and Leslie think, their responses to the film. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I do want to hear your live reactions. I've seen them multiple times now, so it'd be nice to get your fresh perspective.
So I'm so excited to have seen these students' works, and I'm struck both by some of the similarities, but also some of the different approaches that each took. For example, well, on a human level, with our first video from New Haven, I was struck by what I perceived to have been the filmmaker's struggle between this sense of like all these things I have to do that feel like I'm not doing, and yet a day full of talking with friends or preparing food with family or eating with family or doing household chores. So like actually, sort of like that struggle of trying to recognize what you've accomplished versus what you think you're supposed to accomplish.
Right.
Which I think a lot of us can relate to in this particular time, but in life also.
Right, it is super relatable. I mean, like I kind of saw it as like a procrastination film. The entire structure of the film was kind of procrastinating until the final point, which was actually getting the work done. So I think it's nice that she played with the structure for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really struck by the kind of the similar sense of dislocation and also the sense of humor in both films. I just loved the way humor played a very important role in taking that outside lens and looking at this really unprecedented situation. And the final thing, of course, food is so important that both films ended with close to ended with a meal with family, so that while there's of course a great deal of difference between New Haven and Hong Kong, the fact that the family meal was kind of a punctuating point in the day for both families was really nice and kind of heartwarming to see.
Yeah.
Right, the meal kind of takes on like an extra significance because that's kind of what we look forward to each day while being stuck at home now. So it's nice to see. That's why we also like use that picture, like in the poster. We did compare. We did highlight try to find similar points in each film to show as a thumbnail. So it is the food that really does stand out as a comparison.
Yeah, both meals look delicious.
Yeah.
I was also struck particularly in the second film, using sort of visual. Her sort of theme of the film was about repetition, and she used a lot of videographic techniques to sort of reinforce that the positions on the couch and sort of that there's humor and whimsy in that, but it also sort of reinforced this like, and it's the same but different, but the same but different.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess I have something to add to that too. I guess first of all, I really appreciate a student from Hong Kong and New Haven to share this film with us. A lot of effort, like a lot of sharing, and of course, like what we're discussing here, like there's no right or wrong answer. We are really delighted to be able to view this film and to share and talk about that. And yeah, I agree with Missy was talking. The second Hong Kong students film, like I really appreciate that, like expressing a lot of different emotion in the film, like by making the duplicating self images. It really sends me like can get into the shoes of the what is going on in that internal world. The sense of while like I am isolating feeling at home, and like what is all we are feeling around the world right now, and it is totally normal feeling. The sense of perhaps like loneliness, the repetition, perhaps like frustration. I hear that in both movies. And how do we find ways to cope with? Like what we mentioned about like two movies ending with food, like which is comforting. Petting a cat, like it was family. So those are like kind of like really really normal coping to help us. So like, I think it is a great way to share our feelings and points through that. So thank you for sharing with us. If we have both students in the audience, so thank you.
Right. And
Yeah.
just a note about the filmmaking itself, like this program, we've designed it so that it's available for students who have little to no experience with filmmaking to people who have had more experience with filmmaking. So from Harini's introduction, she's watched Groundhog Day. I'm glad like someone even younger has seen that. I think at some point someone
Oh,
mentioned that
Yeah.
movie to me about how repetitive, about the repetitive cycles.
Yeah.
And then they were like, "You're too young to have watched that." But I'm glad to see someone even younger have knowing that movie. And so we have basically created a structure that allows even new filmmakers to kind of use this structure to communicate themselves. Katya is one of the high school fellows from the festival. All of the New Haven films are going to be coming from the fellows from the festival. And at for the fellows, they have varying degrees of filmmaking experience. Where for Hong Kong, we have a lot of students who are coming from King George V School, where they're doing this project as part of their media class. So Hirini has mentioned that she has, like, one of her difficulty is not being able to use the equipment and resources that she normally had before. So I'm glad to see her still making a film of this level without the equipment that she normally has. And one really clear difference that I have to mention is that it's not her in the film.
Yeah.
So it's someone else. So that's actually one of the rules, one of the important rules that you can choose to follow when you're making this movie. We try to get it so that students aren't filming themselves or turning the camera to them, because very quickly that becomes not what you see. It becomes you trying to go into another person's perspective to see yourself. Like, we normally never jump out of our own bodies and then look at ourselves. So we try to get the students to make their films by actually pointing the camera outwards, so we're seeing exactly what they're seeing. But if you have had like more experience with filmmaking, you can definitely stage it. Either you film yourself as an actor, or you can get someone else to double in for you. So I'm very glad to see that this happened even within this version of the program. We didn't really ask them to do anything like that, but obviously the people who are more inclined to make films would take the initiative and then do what they want to do with it.
Yep.
We have like a comment from.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things I was struck by, Jeremy, is the use of the settings in both films. That a lot of variety, and you get a sense of both of the filmmakers' homes, but one that it doesn't feel like an invasion of any privacy. You really catch these wonderful glimpses of each of the home settings.
And we don't see anyone else in the home. I imagine neither of these students are living by themselves, but I think it's nice that they have seen their film or seen their home as like a film set, like a place to be making a creative product in. And that also taps into like one thing from filmmaking, is that it really changes your relationship with your space. When you're thinking, when you're making a film, you're basically converting a three-dimensional space into a two-dimensional screen. So it does help you like reevaluate your own connection to that space, and then helps you look at things in your ordinary environment in a way that you have never thought of before. So that's like, locations is definitely a really important part of it. One thing that I thought was really impressive in Katya's film, I don't know if anyone else noticed that, but when she's talking about her procrastination, because she doesn't get to her work until the very end, but in the middle of it, she does mention about how you would think at that moment. You would go into, she would be like, be outside meditating and doing her work. And then when she talks about that, she actually uses pictures of those activities, even though that's not what's really happening in the narrative. So that's actually something from filmmaking. For me, that's like really interesting, because we're seeing something that's actually not real. It's actually something she imagined as what she should be doing, that she actually went out to capture and then show it on screen, but it's not really the reality of the actual film. So that's really advanced.
Very interesting.
We do have a comment from Facebook which we can bring up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that dialogue. Thank you, Trish. Trish is one of my colleagues in Hong Kong. Um, the box. I love it. I feel like that was. I don't know if that was on purpose, but that do you see that like hover over the cancel? Like she dragged it over the cancel, and then when I first watched it, I was like, "What is she gonna do? Is she actually gonna press cancel? That's gonna take. That's gonna be a very different film."
Yeah.
But absolutely harkens to all of us feeling like at this point much of our lives happen within these little squares.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And yeah,
true.
exactly.
Right.
And she also included some of those squares on the screen for Harry. Like we actually see those screens brought up.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts for this pair? Let me see. I think we can move on to, yeah, there's like about like right amount of time that we want to spend on each pair of those films, so we can actually move on to the next prompt, which is my homeschooling experience.
My name is Eme Mulungula. I was born and raised in Tanzania. I'm a junior, about to be a senior in the fall. So for my video, right, I watch a lot of vlogs, so that's where I got my format idea from, I guess consider. And for my video, I just wanted to tell people as a student how much the quarantine have affected my life personally, and how much things have changed, worldwide and city-wise, Yeah, so when making the video, I had little difficulties about like like taking the best shots, like taking the best way to film something. I had difficulties with that, and yeah. What I love about the video though is like how I had to go and run to film around. Like if you saw the video, I filmed when I was in the car. And it was not planned too. So like I love that when I had just to film around. And yeah, I love filming, so it's just pleasure doing that. Alright, so my homeschool experience. Ever since the pandemic, I get up around 8 or 9 depending on how I'm feeling. Then I start off the day by brushing my teeth and making sure everything is clean. I take a 15 minutes run with my brother. Then, minutes as I get home, I take a deep shower. Once I'm done with everything, I start working on my school assignments. That will sometimes include Zoom meetings. This takes 3 hours depending on which classes I have. If I have math, it takes 2 hours or less because I love math.
A few moments later.
It's hard to believe how much things have changed since the pandemic has opened many people's eyes. Many, including myself, I realized how little we were grateful to the little things in our lives. Anti-socials are missing the crowds. The students are missing the schools they used to complain about every day. Some are even saying maybe it was worth it waking up in the morning to catch the bus.
Many people are craving to go back to society. It's the crowd, the festivals, the concerts, the time you spend to hang out with your friends at the mall. It's the people that make up humanity and society. I've honestly learned a lot during this intense time, but most importantly, I've learned that we should always be grateful for everything in our lives, even the littlest things, the laughs, every event you encounter, your freedom, your health, trees, family, everything, because everything has its end.
Hey, I'm Donovan. I'm about to tell you what I usually do during quarantine. I live in an apartment in Happy Valley. I live with my parents and older sister. I enjoyed the lockdown for the first month, but now I'm just bored. During normal school days, I would wake up at 6:30 and leave the house at 7, so I'd have around 20 minutes to prepare myself. I would change my clothes, brush my teeth, and eat some breakfast. My dad would drive me to school, and I would have lessons as usual. Then, at break and lunch, I would go play football in the field with my friends, and after period 5, I would go home at 3:20. But since the coronavirus, it's all changed. During the weekdays, I would usually wake up at 8:10, then would get on my laptop and lay on my bed and wait till class starts. After tutor time, I would finally get out of my bed and brush my teeth and eat some toast. Right after school, I would have some after-school classes, but usually I had time to take a power nap or game. On the weekends, I would wake up at 9 to 10:30. Then Saturdays, I would have my piano lessons at 2:30 for 1 hour, and at 6:30, I would have my cello lesson till 7:30. Then I would spend my Sundays in bed on my phone. It was kind of hard to keep track of all the homework and make sure everything was handed in. After I'd been able to adjust to online schooling, it was pretty relaxing. A lot of people say that they wanted to go back to school. Well, I do miss my friends. I wouldn't mind having an online class for another month or 2. But hopefully there will be no more cases and the lockdown will be lifted so that we can go back to our normal routines. Why does this song keep playing? Jeez.
Okay, thank you, Emmy and Dominic, for those films. Donovan, for those films. Let's see. Should we start with Missy and Leslie, or should we just jump in?
As you wish.
Let me see. I wrote down some observations. I think Eunice has a really good way of looking at these two films and comparing them.
Sure, why not? So yeah, thank you so much for sharing this film with us. I guess I was really struck by like the theme of this pair would be really like how do we appreciate intercultural empathy in this pair. You know, we start with each side, like New Haven and Hong Kong student. They both start with like the indoor activity, what they do in the routine, and then and then they shift the gear to what is it like outdoor. It really struck me in that. For the New Haven side, you know, which is like, and also especially Jeremy and I, like we live in both city, and we have special feelings around that. And now in New Haven, I mean, like now we're in a better place, things are reopening, but it was really shocking to see that empty spa row, no one is there, a lot of missing, a lot of loss, and we are grieving through that. And that's the time we realize like people, relationship, love is all about what makes us matter, and we value it even more important at those times. For the Hong Kong movie, I feel like another side of it. Like I appreciate that. Wow, like Hong Kong with us, you know, tall building, crowd everywhere, but everyone wear masks. And it was a rainy day. It's a sad day with people wearing masks and like people keeping distant and try to keep our life move on. I think it's a really emotional, heavy movie, but at the same time, it's really give us a lot of deep meaning to appreciate people from another side of the world. We're facing this pandemic together, and like how do people think and feel and cope? And I think it is really meaningful. It's really amazing job for both students.
Right, and what Eunice mentioned just now about seeing the contrast of the streets, I like that both of these films like bring us outside. And I think that's something that they may not be thinking of when they're making their films because they're just used to that environment that they're living in. But then once we actually do something like this where we pair the films together, that's when you can actually see the stark difference and contrast between how people's lives will be in the just wherever they're living. Yes, they're really observant. Thank you, Tom. I think something that's different about these films is the how it transitions from just like kind of listing out what they're doing in the routine. Whereas for the first prompt, my daily routine, it's more about just like kind of catalog and like what your day is like, going from beginning to end. And then starting with Amy's film, like from the New Haven side, he kind of does that in the beginning. He starts off by listing, okay, gets out of bed and he goes for a run, take a shower. He goes through that list, but then once he gets into a car, the narrative switches. It suddenly becomes like not what he's doing anymore. It suddenly goes into a different space where he's reflective and thinking about like reflecting on the situation. And that's also something we can relate to just as people who have been in cars before. Like when you go into a car, you definitely change mind spaces as well. You suddenly start thinking about things in a different way because you do have that space and time and you get to look out the window. So I'm really glad that Emmy brought his camera out to the car to show that visual of like what is leading him to actually have these thoughts. And then that's like a really also really advanced way of capturing that, because usually that just happens to us. We don't think of like capturing that experience on film for an audience. So I really like that reflective aspect of it.
I was also struck by the use of the car and how it sort of reinforced a bit the bubble and the physical stuff. Even though as you're able to move and get to a different space, you're still in this bubble and you're physically separated from other folks. And then showing this sort of, obviously he was filming on a dreary day, which probably added to this sense of isolation and, just a little bit of bleakness to his experience. So that was, particularly striking and resonated for me.
Right. I can't seem to hear Leslie. Is that just me?
Yeah, me neither. So somehow.
But something that was something that was really funny that Missy mentioned that reminded me of for Emmy's film. Like we were kind of in the car for a long time, and that's like a safe bubble. Like that's fine for socially distancing. Like we're fine to be in a car. And then in this film, it kind of like goes on for a while. And I love that when he goes into the supermarket, it's like a 2-second thing. Like it just kind of like jumps out because he's not supposed to be like filming or staying there for too long, but then he still managed to capture something. So I thought the like temporal aspect of it is really funny.
Yeah. And that reminds me, that was also that sort of like shock value was also present in Donovan's film. Particularly, he had that soundtrack of the classical music playing throughout the thing, but then he would stop it and have the funny rewind music as he's like,
Yes.
we're not actually doing this very formal day where I get up and I get my clothes and I go outside. Instead, my routine has been changed dramatically and I'm far less formal. And he'd have these breaks with this sort of like streamline of like what is life, how he's narrating the life versus sort of the moments of reality of, getting the toast out, or particularly at the end, the amusing piece where he's like, oh, this music is still playing.
Yeah. Yes. Tom's comment. Oh, I didn't notice that. See, that's why it's so good when other audience members like pitch in, because I didn't like make that connection. But that is actually a really big similarity. They both use rain to express the sadness.
Rain, yeah.
Pacing of the car. Leslie, you're back.
I'm back. I'm unmuted. Yeah, I was going to reflect on the both films start and end with the home again. So you get that cycle of being back at home, but the powerful reflections in the middle make you look back at the home a little differently. So you see home. I love that part of it. You really could look back at that routine with a new perspective.
Interesting. That's actually thank you, Krista. Krista is also one of my colleagues who helped a lot with the curriculum design. Music choices. That's something that's interesting, like choosing what music represents how you're feeling. But what Leslie mentioned, I also did not think of that. But I think that's amazing as well, because that's actually just film structure in general, like the hero's journey of like starting off in one place, going out on a journey, and then coming back having been changed because of that experience. So I did not expect, like, even in these like three minutes of films, you'd actually see that. Thank you, Phil. Phil's also one of my colleagues in Hong Kong. I think they're just wanting shout outs now.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
These people have been super helpful with making sure that everything runs smoothly, and they're supporting now. But yeah, that's actually the journey. I think it's something that I didn't factor in, but I think going forward, like thinking about people, like how they're writing these prompts, because all of this starts from the writing I think
Right.
that's going to be really important to incorporate, and I think that also touches on why other audience members can relate to it. Is just basic story structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And right, Trish mentioned, and then also
Yeah.
Misty also mentioned this. Sorry, go ahead, Eunice. You can go first.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make a comment, like the way how we discuss it right now is like as therapeutic peer group support here. Like I can see like how therapeutic value is here. We're going through the movies and then like we talk about what each of these element means, the feelings, and like because many of the students or many of us who are trapped in this pandemic, we don't even get a chance to express our feelings. And now right at this moment, and people with all the feedback is really helpful, not only for the student, for everyone to look back what is happening around the world. So like it is, I'm very happy to see that.
And on that note, both of the students actually kind of jumped out of their own perspectives. I know definitely for Emmy's film, he suddenly started changing from I to they. Like he suddenly starts talking about how other people are feeling this way, and Donovan as well, talking about how other people may be feeling this about it. So I think even though we may have like glimpses of these thoughts when we're just experiencing life in general, until someone tells you to like put it down and then present it to another person, you don't really step out of your body to kind of reevaluate your entire situation and consider how it may contrast from other students.
Wow.
One major thing that Trish brought up just now is the glitches and the effects that Donovan did. I love that. Like in the beginning, that's like a really creative filmmaking technique that he did, like starting off the day one way and then rewinding it to start. First of all, I love that he actually did that. For like students in Hong Kong, they've been stuck at home since January, and so I imagine they don't have to like put on their uniform for online classes. But I'm so glad that if this was true, but I'm so glad that this gave him an excuse to kind of like put on his uniform again, and then all the attention to detail. Like he even like before he fake left to the door, he even like put his wallet onto the table, and you can see him like picking up his wallet and AirPods. So I think that was a really nice attention to detail for him. That's like creative filmmaking, like recreating that situation in his room. Any other comments? Let's see. Right. It materializes the emotional experience. That's also a difference. Like a lot of this experience of making these films is kind of like journaling. And then when we tie like filmmaking with therapeutic effects together, we don't really see the connection usually. But then when it comes to journaling, I guess that's more common, right? Like for like it's more common for people to use journaling as a form of mediation. And what the structure for this project is basically taking that and then validating what people are writing down further by using visuals and sound. So that's where you get the text compounded and materialized by what they see and also how that interacts with the narrative. I do actually have like some of the reflection that the students made. And for Aimee, what he wrote was that making this film made him realize how much everything has changed. I think that change is also something that's really important because it is such a different, like we kind of transitioned into this reality, so that we may not be as aware of like how much difference there is until we really get out of it. So usually that happens like after the event happens, like maybe a year down the line when everything hopefully returns to normal, they would gain the perspective of someone who have experienced it. But when you're making the film, you actually force yourself into that later stage. And then you can see backwards.
Jeremy, it also strikes me that this process that you've created that starts with writing down a journaling and then adding layers of the visual component and filmmaking techniques, just add layers and layers and layers to that reflection on the, in this case, we're talking about current experiences, but it just, it adds those moments and those different aspects that provide an outside viewer other access points. When you first view it, you may not hear the thing, but you see the thing, and you still get a way to connect to the emotion that hopefully you and the filmmaker get on the same page.
Yes, and that is also basically the process of how these films are made, we see a lot of like other organizations also inviting students to like make films or make artwork for like to document this current situation. But because my interest is in film education, I don't want to just like give this challenge to students without really laying down like how they can do it. It's really different from just passing on the camera to somebody. Filmmaking takes more than just like starting recording. And I think this process has helped more people kind of bridge the gap between using like words to express themselves and using a camera, like layering them on. Then you can start to begin to actually use the film medium in a way that you can still take control of it instead of letting it go out of hand very quickly.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we have some comments. Let's see. Professor Tony Show. So good morning, Tony. Tony is my mentor from the School of Management. I'm glad he's able to join us. Have the students expressed any responses to other films? That's such a good question. Right now, we're kind of responding to these films as like not really the filmmakers. And that's something that we have tried to do. And maybe Eunice can talk about like how we try to make that process happen, even though all these students are kind of disconnected from each other.
Right. So like I guess like to address this question is really help us to help the student to understand the concept of mentalization, right? As we are viewing, have the student viewing another peer's film, then like they will be able to put into each other's shoes and appreciate other people in the world. How does that feelings and thinking and struggle they may have during pandemic, and how is that like now we are moving to another era of reopening? So I think that process is really important, and we are on the way of developing a curriculum to address that, especially the reflection for the responses. So this is a great education program to foster the intercultural empathy, especially.
Right. So where Eunice's contribution came in was basically after the films are made. What I have done is basically lay down the process to make the films. But then after the films are made, like we're doing right now, there's actually a lot of discussion that can go on. And that's where Eunice can really contribute her expertise and use these films that are made as a means of like discussing the relationship between teachers and their students. Like some of these students make their films and it's completely surprising to the teachers. What the students have chosen to express, the relationship between the students and their family members, the people who are living in the space where they made the film. That's one a level of reflection as well. And then also the key is the reflection between the students, like students who are in Hong Kong, New Haven, them talking to each other. And that's like a big part that's missing in this current version of the program, but which we're hoping to develop further. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's like a huge aspect as well.
Yeah, indeed. Like, so that will be similar to what we're discussing right now. Like we view one of the film, and then like we are discussing what kind of emotion are we feeling that the movie is making us to feel, or can we think into the shoes of the filmmaker? What do you think the filmmaker is feeling at that moment to prompt he or she to make that movie? Can we appreciate each other while we're doing this? So it's like really the exercises, and Jeremy and I are designing curriculum and designing reflection question to guide that process.
And then like just for this version, we did like create this reflection form for students. Like after they finish their films and submit them, we send them a reflection form where we link them to our website, which we'll include later. But then we ask them to watch a film by a student from a different country. And then kind of think through those questions. And then those questions have been framed by Eunice. I did not think of them before, but even just the idea of like, can you consider what the filmmaker was feeling when he was making that movie? That's such a important step. And that like really clarified to me what mentalization is. So while we're down to our last pairing already, do you have any other thoughts, any of you, before we move on?
We're good.
We can also we can wrap up everything like at the end of it as well. So our last pairing of films for the prompt, How I Stay Active at Home. So here we go.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Jessen Cohn, and I chose to do the prompt, How to Stay Active at Home. When choosing this prompt, it wasn't hard for me at all because this was actually something I'd been thinking about a ton before filmmaking even came up. So when I saw this prompt on the options, I was like, it's perfect for me. Adjusting from life before Corona to now was something that was really, really tricky for me, especially within the first 2 weeks. And one of those big issues for me was figuring out how to stay active at home. I'm someone who walks to and from school every day, and I'm in the dance studio 5 days a week. And so when that got taken away from me, it was pretty hard to stay active at first and find that motivation. So I had to think of new and creative ways to keep myself busy and to keep myself active, both physically and mentally, so I wouldn't go totally crazy being in the house all the time. This project was super, super fun, so thank you, Jeremy, for this. The concept of social distancing has brought new challenges into the lives of students. We need to figure out how to readjust our at-home lives and schedules to compensate for what we would normally be doing out in the world. One of these major challenges for me has been figuring out how to stay active. I'm used to walking a mile every day to and from school, as well as going to dance class 6 days a week. When all of that got taken away from me, I felt very upset. It took me about 2 days to realize that I have the power to ensure that I make up for the exercise that I lost in my own way. The first thing I tried to do was find a way to continue dancing in my house. I am a ballet dancer, and one of my role models is Tyler Peck, a principal dancer with the New York City Ballet. I've been following her on Instagram for years, and I noticed that she decided to open up her classes to the public through Instagram livestream. From then on, every day at 1 p.m. sharp, I joined her live video and did class in my room using a chair as a ballet bar. The largest challenge for me was finding ways to self-instruct because I'm so used to being told how to improve. I had to reach inside of me and find self-motivation in order to keep striving and get stronger. After a week of social distancing, my company, New Haven Ballet, started doing online classes through Zoom. This allowed a sense of normalcy to enter back into my life because although the setting was different, I was able to gain exercise in the same way and with the same people that I did before the virus consumed our lives. My parents also encouraged me to get outside at least once a day. On weekdays, I walk around the block before I start my schoolwork to wake up and clear my head with fresh air. On weekends, I go on longer walks with my mom up to Hamden and bike rides around East Rock with my dad. This helps me stay in touch with the outside while still keeping distance from others. As well as staying physically active, it's equally important to stay mentally active. I've been using the extra time in quarantine to explore a creative side of myself that usually goes untouched. I've been working on my sewing abilities and redesigning 3 of my old shirts. I've also been playing around with collage and how different textures pop off a page. On top of that, I've been rediscovering my favorite book series, plus finding new ones. It's been a long time since I've had time to lose myself in the plot of a story. Now that I do, I'm taking full advantage of it. Between this and dance, it allows me to stay very active in the confines of my home.
Okay, and there's one more film for the from the.
Hello, my name is Chloe. I'm a 14-year-old girl living in Hong Kong. Here, most of us lived in tiny apartments of a few hundred square feet. Constrained by the size of our homes, it is hard for us to be physically active. My video is about how I'm enjoying myself while staying at home. I realize there's actually a lot of things to do at home. The pre-production period is the hardest thing in making this video, as when I just received the prompts, it was hard for me to come up with anything to film at all. But when I start to make a list of what I can do at home, I realize the quarantine life isn't that bad after all. Although COVID-19 has brought a lot of negative health impacts to the world, it has also allowed me to reflect on my daily life. It might have been a big push back in the year 2020 to living the ordinary life. When we all thought the quarantine was just going to kill us, life has an interesting way of proving us wrong. Here is how I'm living life to the fullest inside my apartment. We all understand the importance of social distancing, while physically distancing. Even Lady Gaga has set up a virtual concert, possibly better and more creative than any other concert I've been to. If you smile through your fear and sorrow. Video conferences, which has brought the world closer than ever. Let's do it. Of course, I do miss going out and hanging with friends, but considering the current pandemic, it's the best for every one of us to stay at home. Despite meeting my friends online, I'm socializing with an international community through online debate tournaments. They say amateurs wait for inspiration to strike, while the pros get up and go to work. Time to let my creativity fly. Apart from those, I've also been catching up on my long-gone interest in spending time with my family. This period really allows me to reflect how much time I've spent on working and how little time I've spent with the people who support me unconditionally. Care for the world. Along with a friend, we are developing an app to incentivize people to live an eco-friendly lifestyle, especially during the pandemic as many natural resources are used to support the medical necessities.
So thank you, Sylvia and Chloe, for those films. They're really active, really structured, really well thought out. Any responses from you? So it's not just me talking about them.
I think both films are fantastic. One of the things that really struck me about both films are they're both about staying active, but also about family relationships. Both films feature parents, and it has an emphasis on family. And so I love the integration of that into what it means to be active, and that both parents and families were supporting their active lifestyles in the middle of the pandemic.
Right. I actually did not think of that when I was coming up with a prompt. I thought it would just be like a something for them to capture how they're have been physically active, like all the exercises they're doing. But I'm happy to see that's like just one little bit of their films. They actually both kind of balanced the physical activity with, for Sylvia, mental activity, like how she can stay mentally active. And actually both of them, they also talked about how to stay creatively active. So that's something that was really nice to see.
And there was also this sort of arc with both of them that I thought in Sylvia's piece was visually represented. Her perspective at the beginning was very sort of first-person perspective, particularly on her feet and ballet shoes, which of course would be very important to her, but also was sort of singular. And then the world sort of opened up a little bit in terms of share, the outside, her family, and I was particularly struck by the sort of, it's a 2D format, but when she was talking about adding in the sewing and the collage and the different textures, she runs her hand over the materials, and it was, I could almost have a visceral reaction of like, yes, I can imagine those fabrics and the different textures that you're trying to play with when you're building collage. And then for Chloe, the sort of arc was all the things she's doing all by herself, and then that the super touching moments towards the end with her mother, which she sort of talked about in the beginning as this process of building the film. There was a certain amount of healing to it because it made her realize these things that that quarantine is. She expressed it as quarantine isn't so bad, but there was at the end we visually saw it in this strong connection with family.
Yeah, that's definitely a really strong connection between the films, like the family connection with both films. Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's like it's like consciousness. I think it's a really important aspect of it. It's not enough for them to just be feeling it, but when they're putting it down on paper and onto a film, they actually become more conscious of what is happening to them.
Right. So I don't know if we already talked about it. I really appreciate this pair, like both New Haven and Hong Kong student. I see a lot of resiliency, a lot of motivation, a great coping. We're physically distant, but like emotionally we are strongly connected with friends, with gratitude to appreciate the family. I think is really moving. And the New Haven student movie, I also see a lot of.
Oh no, Eunice,
No,
that's bound to
no.
happen. But I think this is actually a really good time. I see in the comments. So can we bring up the KG5 question? I think that's a really good time to address because the teacher for KG5 just made a comment as well. So why did we choose KG5 school? Uh, we actually made this available to basically, sorry, Eunice, I'm gonna quickly touch on one of the questions and then we can resume. Unfortunately, with internet connection, it's just not stable. And
Yeah.
I think it's also the weather. I was
Yeah.
worried about that. But KG5, we actually made it so it's available to students at all schools in Hong Kong. We did our reach out to the international schools we're already connected with and to local schools as well in Hong Kong. On the New Haven side, we got to work directly, or I actually workshopped directly with the fellows. So it was like a 5-week process where I'm guiding them on Zoom every week to make their films. So these students they're art students, but they're not particularly film students. So that was really useful when it's having somebody to actually comment on the work. And then one part of the reflection process is actually also like peer review, like
Yeah.
sharing the process with other students. That's also a really significant part of it. So we had that with the fellows. That was the only group of students where we had that. And I think that also helped them see through their films, like actually complete their films. Because when it's just like someone they don't know communicating with them, giving them instructions for making a film is really difficult to actually pull through. So even to get 70 films, I think that's also really impressive. But for the Hong Kong side, why we're able to get so many films is because of 3 very dedicated teachers at KG5. They're film and media teachers. So that's Kieran, Jody, and Matt. They have taken charge of bringing this program to their students and doing what I was doing with the fellows, basically, like making sure they're all okay, like even just not from the filmmaking level, but the social emotional level, that they're doing fine at home, and then that they can actually have time to finish each step of the process. So let's see, let's pull up Kieran's comment. Kieran is one of the teachers who helped bring this to KG5 students.
Yeah.
Yes, I love these words that Kieran used, adventurous editing. That
Yeah.
definitely matched with the active nature of the films. And Sylvia is really confident in the short, strong, distinct voice. That's also something I want to comment on. Sylvia made a really insightful comment when we were workshopping together. And she said that, because she hasn't made a film before, she said in her reflection that it was tricky to do something that's new because she has never done anything like it. But then by the time she finished, she started to get used to it. But the comment she made was that after she wrote her we call it like the written essay. After writing that short essay and then storyboarding it, basically turning each sentence into an image, she started to realize how these different ways of communicating can actually interplay with each other. So how once you have the text and then you have the image, the meaning suddenly changes. And that's basically the film language. It's how all these different elements are playing together to communicate something. So I think some people would notice, like in the beginning, when she talked about her frustration, she wrote that down, and then sometimes it's not really clear, like what can you show to show frustration. So then that pushed her to actually think of like something she can film to show that, and that ended up with the really powerful shot of her throwing her shoes away.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think with Sylvia is really powerful.
Jeremy, it makes me think that it shows that kind of reflection shows how powerful filmmaking is as a tool for developing self-understanding and creating emotional wellness through that self-understanding, right?
It really, it's not really just the final product. It's the entire process. So that's what we are doing with Eunice, like trying to identify all the different points in the films or in the filmmaking process where there could be some sort of like intervention or kind of self-reflection. That comment from Phoebe. Phoebe is one of the arts fellows from past years. Thank you for tuning in, Phoebe. Interesting to see how the pandemic could change their homes. Thank you. Accommodate activities of their daily lives. Yes, so that's like again like changing the relationship with their homes. That's really interesting. And one difference that I will point out, and then I'll pass it to Eunice, is the physical space they actually have for Sylvia in the middle of the film. She can actually go out on the walk with her mom. and we actually go outdoors for a little bit. But for Chloe, even in her introduction and in her reflection, she talked about how in Hong Kong we're mostly confined to our like mediocre-sized apartments, and so she was really forced to think of what she can do within the confines of her space. So it's really even just like the creative aspect of thinking about what you can do with your space before starting the filmmaking process.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Eunice, are you back? You can
I am
continue.
back. I'm sorry. I guess to reiterate, echo back to many points that have discussed so far. Like I guess every one of us, like we have different way to cope with the pandemic. Like we I think that this model provide a great way to, like, so far we see all the video that, like, some will be more focused.
Oh no.
Oh no, I thought it was just me.
Yeah.
We can see if she's back. We're like pretty much heading towards our the end of this presentation. For Missy and Leslie, do you have anything you want to wrap up for these two films specifically?
It's really anecdotal, but I love the fact that both films feature shoes. The ballet shoes and the
Right.
sneakers,
Wow.
and it made me think about, shoes are a part of being active, and having the right footwear and having the equipment, using a chair as a ballet bar, using the
Right.
whatever that's called, the bar for doing the pull-ups.
Yeah.
There are some wonderful little anecdotes about what it means to be active in a confined space, and that you do even still need shoes.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
The shoes is such an important part of it.
Mhm.
Steph has also been very helpful. She's from the Hong Kong side as well. She's particularly interested in special education needs. So she's also trying to start to see like how this can connect with her work, and to see how this can enable more students with special education needs to also express themselves on film. So utilizing limited space, utilizing limited space is such a good thing about these films. Like forcing you to, first of all, even like when you're filming it, you need that space. Actually, you have to create that space in order to be able to film on camera. So it's really repurposing the space in your home into like a film set, basically, and then doing all the activities, like the ping pong table. That was also, I think there was another comment about the ping pong table. That's also really surprising to see. It's kind of fun, just anecdotally, to see what people do with their homes to make it accommodate for more activities. So maybe we should move on. I feel bad because Eunice can't log in, but maybe she can join before the end of it. But I can really quickly touch on basically the what's next part of this. So we've watched these films. What is the next step that we're going to do with these films? So if we can pull up that slide, just a really quick ending slide. Yes. So first of all, these films, these are just 6 of the films that we have from this initiative. You can see more of them as they're completed, uploaded on our website, filmstylo.com. That's where individual students can sign up. We're going to make this available throughout summer so that more students from different schools, now that they have watched this and maybe learned more a little bit about why we're doing it and how they can actually participate, we would hopefully get more diverse entries into the initiative. So we're going to run that throughout summer, and we're going to keep featuring that on the website. As we mentioned just now, like a really important part of this conversation is still missing, which is the filmmakers talking for themselves and also to each other. So that's kind of the direction we're headed. With my discussions with Tony from the School of Management, we have basically been trying to figure out how we can turn this initiative into a platform. So a social enterprise that can enable this type of intercultural exchange between classrooms using filmmaking. That's kind of what we set out to do with the classrooms. I think it's nice to see how we could have turned this into an opportunity for more students first before making the next step into the platform. So basically after the summer, that's where we're headed. We're going to try to make this available to more students around the world. So for teachers, if you're interested in something like this, on filmstylo.com, you can also sign up as a teacher where we'll notify you when we have updates and we're ready to involve more schools. I'm really looking forward to like when we can have schools actually be connected to each other throughout the filmmaking process as well. Like for example, when we give a prompt to somebody, they can make films based on the same prompts, but they can also ask questions, like specific details they would like to know about the counterpart, about the other person's side. So all of this happened like coincidentally. They didn't plan out to like make the films about their shoes and that kind of stuff. But I think if we can find like unifying points for them to address in the actual writing of the prompt, I think that would unify the schools even further. So Eunice, you're back. Do you want to see if you can say what you were trying to say? I don't know if it's really small right now, so I can't see if she's connected.
Like, yeah, I guess I just want to say a final thank you to everyone. I mean,
oh no.
Oh no.
But that's a I'll wrap up the thank you. I think that we have a lot of people to thank. First of all, thank you to the festival for making this happen. Thank you to Yale China, to Hong Kong ETO and the School of Drama for making the fellowship happen. And also on my end, like thank you to Tony for meeting with me every week to talk about this project and still continuing. Like we just met yesterday and we're still continuing to talk about what we can do together after the summer. So thank you for that. Thank you to all the participating students and the teachers. It's such a stressful time. So I'm so glad to see this be something that you would like to take on top of all the work that you already have to manage. So really grateful for that. And thank you to everyone at Babel Film Workshop for helping facilitate every step of the way to make this work in Hong Kong. So I'll pass it back to Eunice. Eunice keeps getting cut off unfairly.
I know. No, I don't know. Whenever I talk, I just get disconnected. So just want to say, like, thank you all to give me this opportunity. And teacher and everyone who are involved in this program, like echo back to Jeremy, like this is such a difficult time, but we are moving, staying stronger together, and I think this is such a great.
We'll have to fill in the blanks.
Okay, our next generation to and every one of us. So yeah, thank you. Very grateful to be involved.
Thank you, Eunice, for your participation. I'm very glad to have met you at Lunar Fest. That was like a really important part of the fellowship as well. I love how there's so many connections we're making as part of this fellowship that can feed directly into the program. Like a lot of people I've made like concrete suggestions to the program and really changed how it turned out. It definitely would not be the way it is now without their contribution. So
for sure.
I think we're running a little over time. So thank you everyone in the audience for tuning in. I'm going to pass it back to Leslie and Missy.
So just a quick, I wanted to thank Jeremy just for his perseverance and really taking this project so seriously and accomplishing so much in such uncertain times. So he deserves amazing kudos for that. And thank you all.
Thank you, Leslie.